Hi, this is Jeff Blauette, technical agronomist with Cooperative Farmers Elevator, and in this week's Field Friday segment, I wanted to kind of take another step on our corn management as we get to this time of year. Last week we kind of talked about, potentially timing some fungicide applications, and that's coming. This field's not quite tasseled yet. I think the math on growing degree units on a lot of these fields says we should be tasseled, but we aren't. I think this dry, hot, stressed weather we've had has kind of delayed things, but it's coming. I think you'll see planes starting to buzz next week, probably more so than anything this week yet. But I think something else I've just come across, that's another decision that we could, add to the tank or whatever with this fungicide application potentially in corn. I'm starting to see some corn aphids, some corn leaf aphids. We've seen them, off and on in past years. They're an aphid, so typically they like cooler, damp weather. We've just started to have a little bit more of that recently, and I don't know if that's why they're starting to show up, but they're out here. Like I say, this corn isn't tasseled yet. I've got a couple pictures of what some of these colonies look like. The ones I'm finding, are kind of in a circular quarter-size group yet. A few of them are scattered on the leaf here and there, but generally they're in a tight colony yet. But I expect with the weather forecast we've got, not so hot, maybe a little chances of rain off and on. We've had some little shots of rain go through, a little bit more moisture around. We could see those colonies start to expand quite rapidly. The aphids that, infest corn, they say they can have up to 9 generations, so they keep, just like soybean aphids, they can expand fairly rapidly if the conditions are correct. And it depends on if there's any parasites or anything that can keep them in check naturally. But if we have a plane that we're destined to go out and spray some fungicides, it may be worth considering an insecticide if there's enough of them out there. The typical management strategies for corn aphids in this time of year, they're a lot of times the most damage, and the most concern is if they start to really get on fairly thick on the tassel after tasseling, or on that ear and silk area. That's where they can do the most damage. But I know we kind of fly against a little bit of what the university recommendations are. We've all probably seen enough, especially in the western part of our territory. As you get into Lyon and Sioux and some of the western parts of Osceola and so forth, we've seen more aphids in the past, and they do more damage than I think we give them credit for, especially if we're a little short on moisture. Aphids in corn are just like they are in soybeans. They're basically sucking the sap out of that corn plant, and they can do some damage with stressed corn that way as well, and especially as that population continues to increase. They start out right now on the bottom of the plant. They're probably going to work their way up if they continue to expand in population. It's not going to be easy to wipe that population out with an insecticide application with an airplane, but historically we've done pretty well when we've added the insecticide to the mix of keeping that from being a yield robber or any kind of a problem. It's not an expensive addition to the tank either. Yes, there is some concerns and some discussion around the knocking out the beneficials, and that is a discussion we have to evaluate the merit of in each field situation. If we do decide to add an insecticide, there's quite a few that are effective, but we need to make sure that whatever we're using, this year there are some spider mites around. We want to make sure we don't use some of the insecticides that basically can cause a flare-up and wipe out everything but the spider mites, and then they have free reign to expand. So be cognizant of what your selection is. Target fields, historically what we've seen that are worse are those fields that are the fuller season hybrids in the neighborhood. If you've got, and that's kind of why we probably see them more in the west. We've got more of the 110, 12, 13, 14 day corn. The neighbors might be planting 110, 12, or 100 day, for grain, but we have some livestock guys that are planting quite a bit later corn, maybe across the road or maybe across the fence. They seem to get into those fuller season hybrids and do more damage. they have more time to do damage. They prefer that type, that growth type maybe. Not exactly sure why, but that's where we see the most problems, is that full season stuff. So kind of just wanted to make you aware of something I've just come across here this week. And I think with a weather forecast, it would bear the value of looking at your fields before we make that final decision, if there's anything we need to do to address that. So with that, that's this week's Field Friday segment, and we'll see you next week.